linked us to the slides. Does that have the attendance sheet on it?
It does not. So you'll have to do the attendance sheet directly on your schedule.
Okay.
And I think you're able to, I don't know that you have to do it in order, like as you're doing each one, you can go in and do them all at once, because I've already done mine for the day. So if you just a reminder to go ahead and do that so you get your credit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, looks like the bit.ly worked. I'll repost it in a few minutes for any new people who have joined. But we only have an hour and we have a lot of slides, so I think we're going to get started. But this is a fairly small group, and so please feel free to be interactive and hop in the chat or unmute, because we don't want to be talking at you the whole time. Hi, Julie Washenko.
Right. And I'm going to be presenting the first part, so Jen's going to be manning the chat, so I'm not going to be able to see that. So if you have any questions, she'll just interject as we're going along. But you are here today for teaching big concepts using little words, and that is called the art of descriptive teaching. Really quick, I do want to go in here and turn off my camera so you can not see my face the entire time. So as Jen put in the chat, there's our bit.ly. There's also a QR code and a reminder to go ahead and make sure you get your credit in MLP by filling out the attendance sheet. This should be a familiar slide to everybody, nothing new that you haven't seen before, but I just wanted to point out that the last bullet is really one of our focus, that it is our responsibility providing that equitable learning opportunities for all students. So general ed, special ed, EL populations, everybody's included. So that's kind of the premise on how we develop this course, is reaching all learners. The objectives for today, the words that we are using with students can really affect their comprehension and participation in the classroom. So this is especially true for certain populations, like I said before, including the special ed and EL populations. So in this, we're going to discuss descriptive teaching and ways to incorporate the strategy and the concepts behind context-specific vocabulary using high-frequency, usable, and common words. Like Jen said before, we appreciate your audience participation and interaction, so please feel free to use the chat, unmute your microphone if you have something to share or if something doesn't make sense, so we can make sure that we get those grounds covered and get that foundational level for you. So I know that we have a smaller group, but who is on our audience today? Go ahead and use the chat. Kind of tell us about where you are, what school you are at, what position you have, and the students that you're serving.
So we have a wide variety, which is awesome. Oh, Arlene's here. Hi, Arlene. So we have some speech paths, some crosscat, some EL, some gen ed teachers. We have a wide variety, which is awesome. So for our speech paths, some of this will be some review, but that's okay. I think I've read that there's studies that you need to hear things at least 3 times, I think, before it sinks in. Welcome everybody. We built this course for a broad audience and for a variety of learners and for people that will have diverse backgrounds working with language learners and early language learners. So if it's review for you, then hopefully you grab something new today. And if it's new for you, you have our contact information if you have any follow-up questions later. Welcome everybody.
Yes, welcome. So just doing some foundational, the nuts and bolts of teaching language. The foundation of language really is for anyone working with early language learners, from preschool students, special ed students, the EL population. But really this becomes applicable to every educator, because every year our students are adding to their previous knowledge and vocabulary, and classrooms are, filled with a diverse group of learners. So you may look at this and think that this may not be applicable to you, but you never know who you're going to get in your classroom, this year or next year. So just tucking away some information that you can recall for later. So we're going to talk about communication, and when we're talking about that, we're talking about the active process of sharing and exchanging ideas, opinions from one person to another. So we often just think of communication in the expression aspect, but it can be both verbal and nonverbal. We can break this down further into functional communication skills, which is the most basic of communication skills. This is the communication that gets one's basic wants and needs known, such as, saying, oh, I want that, or I'm hurt, or I need to use the bathroom. These are not really complex thoughts, and they are really often the first types of messages that children begin to communicate. It can also go beyond the verbalizations and include personalized movements, gestures, signs, using pictures, and even those students that are using alternative and augmentative communication systems. So we talked about communication, and now let's move on to language. I know this is, there's really a lot more we could say about this, but we're just kind of getting your feet wet in this. But a lot of times people use these two words interchangeably, but really they are different. So language is actually the words we use and how we use them to share ideas and to get what we want. So it's really saying what words mean. Like star can mean the star in the sky, or it could be, star as somebody famous. We can use it to make new words, saying like friend or friendly or unfriendly, and each one of those words means something different. So we're incorporating using grammar and grammatically correct endings to create new words. And then we talked about how we're putting words together. For example, in English, we could say something like, Sally walked to the new store, instead of saying Sally walked store new. So it's about word order. And then finally, what we say can be different at different times. We can politely say, would you mind moving your foot? But if the person doesn't move away, you could say, get off my foot. So using different words to say different things in different contexts or at different times. So there is that relationship between communication and language, but they're not used interchangeably. So language is the system of communication, and the actual communication itself is the exchange of information between two or more people. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And then we wanted to show you a couple of slides, and if you've, some of our SLPs have probably already seen these, but I can watch them 100 times and still love them. But really pay attention to these both, thinking about what I just discussed about communication and language. Oops, I gotta go back.
Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, no, not this one. This is Instagram now. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. He did. He was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
So I just love that. I love that exchange, and we'll talk about that after the next video and discuss the difference between the two videos.
Tell me what you just said.
I like you when you give me cookies.
You like me when I give you cookies, but you don't like me all the time?
Yeah, no.
Why?
But I like you, only love you again. cookies from me.
Oh, so only when I give you cookies do you like me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I love you.
I love you too, but I don't like you all the time.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
I just love that. Let me get back to that. So which one of these videos is communication example and which one is language? You can either shout out, put it in the chat, and then we'll go on with that. And why do you think that is, why did you choose which one was communication and which one is language? I can't see the chat, so Jen, if anybody's responding. If not, I'll just move on and I will give you the answers.
Nicole said number 1 is communication and number 2 is language. Arushi, first one's communication. Oh, Yolanda, I like her answer. Both are communication, but one is language and the other's pre-language. So everybody's right on track.
Right. So on the first video, even though the father is talking to the child, although there are no real words from the baby, there's clearly communication. You see all those gestures, the vocalizations, they're doing the turn taking and their exchanges. And the second one clearly is language. He has the words, he can put them in order, he can express himself and convey the message that his mom can clearly understand. So you guys are right. So who teaches, when we look at this, who's responsible for teaching language and how to communicate? Who's responsible? SLP? When you go to, if your student goes to speech, do they just learn language and communication during their speech time?
Everyone's shouting out E, which is awesome.
Yeah.
There's a quick question from Erin Taylor that I want to address. She said, what is an SLP? Great question, Erin. It's a speech language pathologist. So every school in Loudoun County has at least one, and they work with students with identified language disorders or communication disorders through the IEP system.
Good question. Sometimes I forget that, we use these acronyms so regularly that we forget that, we just assume that our audience knows what that is. So thank you for asking that question because likely somebody else had that question as well. So it's important to also consider how we build language. Look how much growth there is between ages 1 and 3. The misconception is that all kids are just naming things. You can kind of look at the example of those My First Word books. They're all filled with nouns: cows, pig, horse, goat. But really they begin developing more language by combining words and continuing to build language and have more complex sentences. So, we have that foundational level that grows into building sentences as students get older or kids get older. In the general ed, the vocabulary used to describe different vocabulary and instruction is typically labeled in tiers. So we have the tier 1, 2, and 3 words vocabulary. So in a nutshell, the tier 1 words are those most common words and typically used in everyday speech and learned through conversation. So you're just hearing it and then you start incorporating that. The tier 2 words are the more high frequency used words by more mature language learners. Users and more common in writing than in speaking. And then we have those tier 3 words, which are those specialized words, that you're using in specific contexts. So those are things that should be familiar to anybody in general ed and populations. So in the most tier 1 and some tier 2 words are what we consider we can also term as core words. And those are those high frequency words used across contexts and users. There's a link there on that slide that says 1 million words. And if you actually click on that link, I'm not going to because I don't want to pop back and forth, but it'll take you to what words are in the English dictionary, how many words right now. So as of January 2020, there was like 1,057,000 words, and we're always adding to the dictionary. When I went and clicked on it, for example, awesome sauce is now a new word that is actually now, termed as an actual word in the dictionary. So awesome sauce. So where an educated adult may know and use as many as 15,000 words, studies show that there are about 350 words that are used most frequently and across context and account for about 80% of the actual spoken words we use all the time. So this is what we refer to those core words, and is the same regardless of what language is spoken. So those core words are, across contexts, across populations and ages. And then we have our fringe, which is the other 20% of, of the words that we are using. And this is what we call fringe vocabulary. And they are the low frequency words that are very content specific. So words like giraffe and volcano and Lincoln, those are the fringe words. And they're not just generic words that will not likely be used across environments, but in a certain setting or in a specific subject. So fringe can be really important because it makes the language meaningful, and it can be, personalized and personal vocabulary for individual needs or interests. So it's, even though it's a small subset, they still can be very important, and we don't want to forget about the fringe vocabulary. And core is also synonymous with tier 1, but it also is synonymous with the BICS. So for the, the EL, we just want to kind of tie it into those EL teachers as well, to illustrate that the BICS and CALP are really using the same concepts. If you're looking at the tier 1 words in BICS, and those would be the core words, and then you look at looking at the CALP, for example, that would be more of the tier 3. So what could be the synonym for CALP would be the fringe vocabulary, tier 3 vocabulary. And just as monolanguage speakers progress through the developmental milestones of vocabulary development, so do those dual and multilingual speakers. So just kind of tying that back in. So what vocabularies do we need? We really do need both fringe and core. The fringe words make that communication meaningful and personal. They're often easier to teach because you can picture them in your mind. And when I say something like truck, you can picture what that is. But the core words are more flexible. They can be used across environments and communication partners, but not as easy to picture. If you think of the word it's not very easy to picture, but which word do we use more in everyday speech, it or truck? So just kind of keeping those in mind, that we may have a lot more words than what we actually use on a frequent basis. So you can look at this link as well on the 100 most high frequency core word list. You'll notice there's a wide variety of words, pronouns, verbs, prepositions. What you don't see are a lot of nouns, and I pulled this out as well and typed those words out so you can look at them. So there's all of these different words. Here they are again. What themes and trends do you notice about these words? You guys can put that into the chat if you can have some conclusion about what these core words are. And our speech language pathologists don't give away the answer if you know it. But what types of words are they? What are the themes?
Michael says 1 syllable. Olga says they are short. Adjectives, basic language using 1 syllable.
Perfect.
So,
yep.
Yep, you guys are on the right track. Julie says they're basic language. They're really a variety of words. We want you to see that you have actions, you have pronouns, you have prepositions, you have adjectives. It's not a list of nouns, which is really the point that we want to drive home here is, like Stacy said, those books that we buy our babies of the first 100 words, it's all nouns. But when you really look at what are the top 100 words used in our language, there's not very many nouns on there. It's a wide variety of language.
So another way to look at it is those words are very familiar to the Dolch sight word list and the Marvin list words that our early learners are using for reading and literacy. So the core words we say are also the same words that we learn to read. So there's kind of that correlation. Those are those frequently used words. They are short, they're simple, they are, very flexible to use across contexts. And this is again is that good visual, just showing that those core or tier 1 words are so important, but it isn't fully linked 100% without that fringe making up the rest. So that 80-20 rule, remembering that, we don't want to just be using all of those content, core or content fringe words and teaching those. With start looking at how we can incorporate using core words to explain those fringe words. Again, here's another visual. On the left, we know it's showing that we know a lot of words. Most of those are considered fringe vocabulary. And then there's that small subset of core words that we're using of the total number of words we use. But we compare that amount of words with what we know to the usage frequency. We know a lot more words than we frequently are using. So just that correlation between what we know and what we use are a little bit different. So we decided we wanted to take a sample from, something. We took a sample from language sample from a movie, and when we listen to the language that they're using, most of what people say is that same core vocabulary that we've been talking about. So you can notice how these words are used along with the important fringe nouns in order to communicate the complete thoughts. So taking the total words and the blue and yellow, the core words, and the marvelous words, we group those together as all core. And with the total number of words, you can see that that percentage of that passage in a movie was 75% core language, core words. Again, we were curious, does this apply to something like a sitcom and in contexts that our kids maybe are presented to in the world? Different media for different audiences, but both are using a ton of core, which means our learners are going to get exposed to those words in, throughout context in whatever media they're using. I just can't believe that on Seinfeld, it's 80% core, using those core words versus the total words. So it is everywhere. It is, it's not a concept that we're trying to teach differently, but we just want to really tie it in, like this is why it's applicable, why it's important to really focus on those core words. So we call that, why do we teach the big concepts using little words? We first need to define what the big words are when we're working with students, and what we can do to simplify those big words into the little words. So big words would be those tier 2 and tier 3 words. They're not what they are hearing in everyday language. So those science terms may be brand new to them. But if you can explain those big words with little words, those are more commonly used and heard and spoken when first learning language. So those are those sight words, used across contexts and all age ranges. So if we are using the words our students use, it will help them to understand those bigger concept words. Does that make sense?
So far, so good.
Okay. So you can use those core words to redefine those curriculum vocabulary words. Those fringe words will help for student comprehension and learning and expanding language. So when we're meeting language learners where they are at the current time, we are using the same vocabulary they use. And I just love this meme. If you had to describe banana without saying banana, how could you do it? You would describe it, curved yellow fruit. If somebody just said curved yellow fruit, well, it would hopefully spark that, oh, they're talking about a banana. But now we want to really talk about how we can plan for simplifying that curriculum vocabulary. And we can use things that you're probably already familiar with and using in different ways, but now tying it into how we can simplify language and vocabulary. So the first one is this idea web. Let's look at them from the perspective of planning and using descriptive teaching. Use whatever kind of idea plan or graphic organizer might work best for you, and have your student, some students may respond well to one or another, and you can actually have them help you in the creation of these as well. So this one, you have the fringe word of ocean in the middle, and then all the describing words around it. So maybe you don't have ocean as their word, but you're using the visual references, or you can use pictures in these if you didn't want to use words. So just really trying to concrete the concept around the big word. And here's a simple compare and contrast, and what is similar between oceans and rivers. Same type of thing, using descriptive words to describe what an ocean is and what a river is. And then the Freyer model. This is one of the simpler ones to use. Again, using these with your students and having them help complete it. If you're modeling the thinking and modeling the breaking down of those big concepts into smaller words and components, if you're modeling this out with your students so that they can begin to do that more independently. So you have the, the definition, the characteristics, examples, and then non-examples. So once you've had that broken down, then you can really use the descriptive teaching in redefining the vocabulary. Again, this one is using some visuals with pictures, and we're talking about organism. When you break that down, notice it's not just a swap of one fringe word or one core word. Sometimes it's going to take more little words to describe that big word. Again, here's another one. It's not one-to-one in redefining the endangered species, but using that simplified language to describe the content of the fringe word. And again, sometimes it takes several little words to define that. Okay, so up to this point, you've been getting the nuts and bolts on core and fringe. The next several slides are going to be you guys being given a fringe word and using descriptive teaching to simplify that into core words. So using this in the chat, or you can shout out whatever platform you wish to do. Let's see what fun things each person can come up with for the following words that I give. So Jen will be reading these out in the chat, and notice on each of these slides there's going to be a slight hint that might help you shape those things into core words. These are not natural things, it takes some planning, so if you can't come up with anything, we'll help you out as well. So the first word is monsoon. That is our fringe word. We want to turn it into core words.
We have a couple people saying wet, big rain, too much water, heavy rain, water. People are nailing it. They got it.
Awesome.
Perfect. Move on.
Lots of hard, fast rain. Photosynthesis.
Process, plant. Process, light. Light makes food for plants. Yay, you guys got
Perfect.
it.
Yep.
I like it when you guys are using more than one word to describe it too, because photosynthesis, that's a process. That's a big process. And so it might take lots of words to really show that concept. So you guys got it. Great.
Right. Using the definition to define the word. Sprinkles.
Dots, light, tiny. Colorful, edible sugar, many colors, many, colorful. Love on ice cream. Good job. Small,
Perfect.
little. You guys got it.
Yep. Jen and I came up with little colored candies goes on top. All right. Next one. Orchard.
Fruit trees, fruit on trees. Lots of trees where apples grow. That's a really good one. Place for fruit trees. Farm where fruit grows, a group of fruit trees, lots of trees and fruit. Good job, guys. You got it.
You guys got this. The last one is habitat.
Home, house where I live, place for animals, animals home, living place, animal house. Nailed it. Where animals live. You guys got it.
Awesome. So you guys definitely do have that, and this is where Jen is going to take over from here, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and swap to her sharing hers. All right, Jen, you good?
Okay, guys. So up until now, we have really focused on what words to teach and how to teach them, but this has all been for you or for the teacher. So now we're going to move on to a section on how to engage students in discussions about those tier 3 or academic vocabulary words and how to get them talking about those concepts. So there's 2 general approaches to formulating your discussion or comprehension questions. There's the descriptive approach and the referential approach. So we're going to check out those differences. The first approach, the descriptive approach, Guides teachers on formulating questions that do not require students to answer using that Tier 3 fringe curriculum vocabulary in their answer. So instead, it allows the student to express understanding of those concepts in their own words. They're very open-ended questions. They're really flexible. They allow for more than one answer, so it's not a right or wrong situation. And generally, they begin with statements such as, tell me more about. And then there's the referential questions. It's more along the lines of your traditional right or wrong quiz type question. The answers or discussions require the students to use that academic Tier 3 vocabulary fringe word in their answer for it to be considered correct. So these types of questions are generally very factual, and they don't allow much room for your students to expand or really use much creative thinking. So when you're planning your discussion questions or your comprehension questions, you want to think from moving from the red side to the green side. So let's look at some examples of that red side and then that green side. So if we were going to have a science lesson and we were talking about the 3 states of matter, that referential factual question would be, name 3 states of matter. Your students would then have to state solid, liquid, and gas. And it's right or it's wrong. They did it or they didn't. But if you've done your whole lesson on matter and you've done your whole lesson on solid, liquid, and gas, and you ask them a comprehension question that's descriptive, you could say something like, describe something when it's solid. And then your students can use that common language that they're more familiar with when they're an early language learner, and they can give you an answer like, keeps its shape, or it's hard all the way through. And so kind of looking at these 2 styles, which one do you feel shows that your students have really grasped that concept that you're trying to teach them?
Yep, people are saying descriptive.
Got it, guys, nice. Because I can repeat, like looking at the dinosaur unit, I can repeat the word carnivore, but that really doesn't demonstrate that I understand what that concept is. When I use that open-ended descriptive style question and your student gives you something like eats meat, you know they really got it. Okay, so this next video, I know all of our speech pathologists have seen this because it's pretty awesome. And I have to do a little switch on my presentation style to show it to you real quick. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so this is a really awesome video on listening to a teacher in action using descriptive teaching, not only to describe vocabulary, but to ask those comprehension questions. So let's take a listen. The audio on this is horrible, but it's a great concept.
Today we're doing a lesson on emergency preparation. And so part of our lesson, we have to talk about what does it mean to have an emergency, and what does it mean for something when we have preparation. Okay, emergency preparation. First thing I think we have to think about an emergency is a bad thing. Yep. Generally, emergencies are bad things, not good things. All right, so the first thing we have to know about emergency is usually they are bad things. Second thing about emergencies is that they do not happen every day. Hopefully. What's the second thing we know about an emergency?
Bad things do not happen every day.
All right, they're bad things, and they do not happen every day. Hurricanes. Which group would they fall into? We know they're coming, or we do not know they're coming? Mr. Cole?
Don't tell me with again. We know.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, so I love that video because it really shows that she took, let me see here. Okay. She took that fringe vocabulary word, that tier 2, tier 3 word of emergency, and she broke it down and described it. But another great thing I want you to take away from this video is she still is using that word emergency. So I don't want that to get lost in our presentation. Is your students are still exposed to these fringe vocabulary words and these tier 3 words, but it's how you then describe and define them for them so that it aids in their comprehension. So our ultimate goal for all of our students, whether they're special education students or EL students or general ed students, our ultimate goal for all of our students in Loudoun County is that they're able to have a spontaneous novel utterance generation. We call that SNUG. So they're exposed to those concepts being taught as part of the curriculum, but they're able to demonstrate their understanding of those concepts as well, no matter what their language level is. And to do that, they must have SNUG. So
general quick, Stacy Perman asked if we can explain to everyone the visual that the teacher was using, that Gail was using on that. So it was hers is a word board with all the core words. So she would point to those words to facilitate the communication and language. And then the students could be using those words on whatever system that they are using, whether it's a manual core board, whether it's some type of voice output device. So she is modeling using those words on, her word board to teach the students, and they can use the words that they have available in their system. Does that make sense?
that's great clarification. Okay, so descriptive teaching is really hard to do on the fly while you're teaching. There's a million things that teachers are focusing on at once, especially in this new virtual learning environment. And so we wanted to take you through some steps for planning that will hopefully have some success with your students when you're using descriptive teaching. It's really hard to do on the fly. If you're thrown into a science activity and you're having to on the fly define and describe all that tier 3 vocabulary, it gets tricky. So at the very end of this presentation, we do have a planning guide linked for you, but we'll go through it step by step. So I took a very basic reading passage here, and I went through and I highlighted for myself the core vocabulary words in that passage. And the reason why I did that is because not that I'm going to be defining and describing or using descriptive teaching on those core vocabulary words, but I may be able to see a theme in my core words, or I may be able to find words that I can use to then define and describe my fringe vocabulary words. So remember, the core words are those early sight or Dolch words, and the words that people use when they're first learning to talk or they're early language learners. So then I took the same passage and I did the same thing where I highlighted my fringe vocabulary words. So core is in blue and fringe is in yellow. And then that tells me which words do I need to plan ahead of time to define and describe for my students while we're reading together. And so I used a really simple little chart here where I put my French vocabulary on one side and then how I would define and describe it on the other side. So I would take something like eggs and I would define it and describe it as a new baby animal. But I have that prepared for me going into my lesson, so I don't have to think about that. So now that I've prepared my vocabulary, how do I incorporate the descriptive teaching methods while we're reading that story about Mama Duck together? It's important to still read both the core and fringe vocabulary words out loud to your students so that they can hear your pronunciation of those words and listen to how they're used within that context of the story. When you come across a fringe word to describe, read the whole sentence, pause, point to the word in the sentence so the student can pair the audio cue you've given them with that visual cue of the text of the word, and then use your descriptive teaching skills to describe the word to the student. So using that Mama Duck story, I would read the sentence out loud. When she came back, there were 5 eggs in her nest. Then I would pause and I would point to the word eggs. I would say eggs, and then I would say, eggs, those are baby animals. They were in the nest. The nest is a home for a baby. It's made out of hard brown sticks. So I embedded that descriptive language into my explanation, and then I would just keep on reading. Another tip that I like is that while you're planning, if you're using a physical book with your student, you can add sticky notes to the pages of the book with your fringe vocabulary list on it in your descriptive language, so that while you're reading, your interaction feels more authentic. It's just a little visual cue for you on the page.
And I do want to give a shout out to Stacy Prugman is really, really good at doing that. And she uses little highlighting tape, and she gets her students doing that, defining those the core words and picking out the core words. So shout out to you, Stacy.
And just for everybody in the audience, your SLP, your speech language pathologists in your building, they're experts in this. And so always feel free to touch base with them too if you get stuck or if you kind of need a little refresher idea on this, because they're true experts in this in your building. Okay, so for my Mama Duck story, I have my referential set of questions and my descriptive set of questions. I could ask my student, what did Mama Duck find in her nest? And the only answer they could give me would be 5 eggs. But if I phrase my question again in that open style of, tell me about the nest, there's a multitude of answers that they could give me that could all be considered correct, and allows my student to use that language that they have in their repertoire. So avoid the referentials. This is a quick visual for you on how I might fill out a planning guide to be included in lesson plans or to be included in child study documentation that I'm using these strategies with my students, and that I'm planning and preparing ahead of time to be prepared for my session for using that descriptive teaching. So you are here today and you signed up for our session because you wanted to know how technology could help you in this process. So on the following slides, we're going to show you some websites that you can use to help you with your descriptive teaching planning. All of the sites that we show you are free or have a free version. So none of this is paid for. None of it is an extension or an app you have to download. They're just free and accessible websites. Okay, so the first one we're going to go through is Kids Wordsmith. It's pretty cool because it's a kid-friendly online dictionary. So this is great for your early language learners, but it's great for any student in your class. Feeling comfortable using a dictionary that's made for students or for kids kind of eases your mind too on making sure the definitions and content's going to be appropriate. So when you've identified that French vocabulary word that you want to target in your planning and you're stuck on how you want to describe it, you can enter it into the website and it will provide you with a student-friendly definition that you can use as a starting point for applying that descriptive teaching principle. So if you're stuck, it's a great place to go. So we're going to look at it really quickly, and I'm going to type in the word habitat. So it gives me a pronunciation for your students to listen to if they want to, and then it gives me a very simplified definition, the natural environment of an animal or plant. I still think natural environment, it's a bit fringy, but oh, I looked down here and it has the word home. So it's got a couple different resources on here to get your wheels turning on how you could describe those academic content words. Okay, this one, Rewordify, this one's my personal favorite. What this website does for you is you can take a sentence or a passage or a paragraph and you can copy and paste that whole block of text into the website, and it will identify for you those tier 3 content fringe vocabulary words, and it will redefine them and redescribe them for you. So I have it open right here, and I've already copied and pasted into my text box the sentence I wanted to use, which is investigators continue to work around the clock in steep terrain, thoroughly examining all aspects of the scene in an attempt to determine a cause. That's pretty wordy and pretty tier 3 vocabulary heavy. So I'm going to click Rewordify text. and then it's right up here. It has changed my sentence. And any word that is yellow and highlighted is a word they found in my original text to be tier 3, and it's defined and described version. So if I hover over land, if I click on it, it will show me it changed terrain to land. So this takes all of the guesswork out of it for you. It's a really awesome tool. And you can do this in front of your student and have a discussion with them. Gee, it changed terrain to land, because land defines and describes the word terrain. Okie dokie. The next website we're going to look at together is called the Upgoer 5 Text Editor. This one's pretty awesome as well, because the whole website only uses the top 1,000 most frequently used words in the English language. Again, my SLPs might know this, but why do you think they defined 1,000 most used words? What is 1,000 defining and describing? It's talking about the word 1,000. So 1,000 is not a frequently used word, but the word 10 and the word 100 are frequently used words. And so if I go to this website, in this text box right here, you can type in any sentence or phrase or paragraph that you want, and it will underline for you what words are fringe, or what words are tier 3, or what words are not most commonly used. And so it doesn't redefine them for you, but it identifies for them for you. So if you're still kind of struggling with that concept of what's fringe and what's core, this Upgoer 5 text editor can help you with that. And then down here, it tells you what words were not most commonly used words. And if you hover over them, it will give you a synonym or another word that is most commonly used. So that's pretty helpful as well.
Jen, in the chat as well, somebody had pointed out that in your first example of that she would change around the clock for her EL learners, because that, they would try to do that direct translation. So you kind of have to, if it's figurative language or that type of thing, what other kind of words you're going to have to use to replace or to describe those words. So just something to keep in mind as well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, the next one, this is great for using with a whole class. It's called the text compactor. And what makes the text compactor so helpful for using with more than one student is you can copy and paste into the website a whole paragraph again, or a whole story, and you can drag on a scroll bar how much of that text do you want to have it simplify. So if you have this passage, and we have a lot of cross-cat teachers here. So if your students are in English class and everybody's going through this passage, but your student needs something simplified down, text compactor can do it for you. But maybe his buddy needs it simplified down even further. Text compactor can do it for you. So it's great for using with a large group of students. So here's our text compactor website. In this box, I copy and pasted that Thanksgiving passage, and then using this slider bar, I have it set right now, it compacted it down to 50%. So it took 50% of that text and simplified it down for me. And then if I drag it down to 10%, then I get basically one sentence that summarizes that whole passage. So this is, again, is a really helpful differentiation tool for you. Okay, so we're living in the virtual teaching world right now. So we wanted to put a couple slides in really quickly for if you're doing classes where parents are present, or if you are in a role where you're supporting parents at home. But we wanted to give them some ideas of how can they use these descriptive teaching practices with everyday activities that your students are going to be encountering in the home. So I did a quick example with cooking. Cooking is such a social interactive activity that's language rich, but a lot of that language that you're going to encounter in a cooking activity is very tier 3 fringy. So let's look together on how we could kind of define and describe that for our students at home. So I took the original recipe instructions right over here and I typed them out, and then I pre-planned so that I was prepared, and I defined and described them over on this side. So instead of using the word preheat, that's very fringy, I might say turn it on or make it hot. So again, it's important that you read those original instructions to your student and you expose them to that vocabulary. And you can ask them, do you know what these instructions mean? Maybe they can tell it back to you in their own words. But when we use that descriptive teaching, it brings it down to that early language learner level. Okay, so we're wrapping things up. We're coming to the end here. We have a quick little quiz. Just shout out and put it in the chat what you think. And it's all just true or false. So number 1, you can only use core vocabulary words in your descriptive teaching.
We got a whole lot of falses.
Nice job, guys. You've been listening. Number 2, students don't need to hear you say the fringe vocabulary word, only the way you define and describe it.
More falses.
Good job.
Falses.
Good job. So they still need to be exposed to it. They need to hear you say it. They need to see it in print. They need to hear it in the context of the sentence. You're just also defining and describing it. So number 3, referential questions are open-ended, allow for multiple ways for a student to answer, and utilize descriptive language.
Again, more falses.
You guys got it. Great, awesome. That would actually be a descriptive question, not a referential question. Number 4, SNUG stands for Spontaneous Novel Utterance Generation.
Ah, Ben, see, you were sensing a trend of false. But SNUG is true.
That one's true. So for most of you, if you're not a speech pathologist, most of you, that's probably a new concept that you're hearing today, or a new acronym. But we use it a lot in the communication and language world because we want students to be able to say whatever they want, whenever they want, to whoever they want. And to do that, they need to have access to flexible vocabulary words, not just noun, 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 noun. If I only gave them access to the words photosynthesis and carnivore, they're not going to be able to tell me I'm feeling sick, I need to go to the nurse, you know. All right, last one. If the student can say the fringe or curriculum related vocabulary word, you don't need to use descriptive teaching.
False, 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 false. That is definitely false.
That's totally false. I can say coulrophobia, but I may not know what it means. It actually means fear of clowns, which is very true. But you need to, even if your student can say it, they may only be able to repeat it. That doesn't mean that they actually have understanding of it. Okay, so we only have 6 minutes left, so we're running out of time, and I want to save time for questions. But you have this as a resource for you. There's a couple different activities here that you can choose from. If you want to do an activity and you want to meet with me or Stacy to talk through it and how did it go, or you want to talk with your speech language pathologist at your school and chat about how that activity went for you, then we are always here and available for you. But unfortunately today, I think we ran out of time. But you do have this as a resource. So again, here at the very end is linked for you a very simple basic planning guide. You put your fringe words or your content or your tier 3 vocabulary words on the left, and then you define and describe them using your descriptive teaching skills on the right. Okay, so using the chat or shout it out, tell us in your own words, your little words or your core vocabulary words or your flexible language words, how are you going to use these strategies with your students?
We have during the read aloud.
Good. Yep.
Yolanda says she's going to make a visual dictionary for math, complete with sentence frames, specialized reading, guided reading when I modify my assessments for ELS. I will be using the text compactor for sure for independent reading. So the idea is for us to give you some concepts that you can learn today and take and use immediately tomorrow and not have to do a whole lot, but just really getting you thinking how you can reach your students where they are using the language that they use every day. We have pre-teaching vocabulary, describing words using all those resources, especially for science. When I teach content vocabulary, modifications of general ed materials, that's perfect. Parent coaching, super important. I don't think that they maybe necessarily even know that they're using such big words sometimes. Remembering to use nouns with adjectives. The presentation, yes, the presentation should be available in Schoology. They're being recorded, so they will be able to be referenced later on. Having students highlight words as they're unsure about, and then discussing them as a group, and sharing resources with gen ed teachers. So there's a lot of information. And you know, if you want to learn more, you can come through to us, your CFAT. Google is your friend as well.
So Stacy and I don't think we told you this at the beginning, we are specialized instructional facilitators for assistive technology. And so there's 10 of us in the county, and so we have the schools divided up amongst us. So we each have 10 to 13 schools-ish. But I've linked for you here who your CIF is, who your assistive technology facilitator is. So if you have follow-up questions or you want to talk to them about other technology strategies you can use to keep your students engaged, we support everybody in the whole county. And then also, if you are a self-contained special ed teacher or a speech language pathologist, stay tuned for more information on descriptive teaching when we release LWAC Plus. So if you liked what you saw today, there may be more coming. But that's all we have for you today. We really appreciate you guys coming and being so engaged and so interactive. And again, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to contact us. We're always here to help you.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day learning.
Stacy, stop recording.